Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of In Ohio Country Today podcast, part of the In Ohio Country Today TV show and our iHeartMedia Radio Ag Network. I'm Big Dan Wilson, and this week our feature story is with Vivek Ramaswamy and Rob McColley. They're running for governor and lieutenant governor, respectively, here in the Buckeye State. It's a great interview this week in Ohio Country Today. When you want reliable results and easier soil management, turn to Case IH tillage equipment. Built for both fall and spring work, Case IH machines deliver the consistency you need to create the ideal seedbed season after season. Designed for durability and performance, they're ready to handle whatever your fields demand. Stop by your local Apple Farm Service or learn more online at applefarmservice.com/Case IH. Dye Real Estate and Land Company invites you to our next land auction in Huron County. This 119-acre farmland features quality soil and excellent drainage. Join us June 9th, 6 p.m. at the Attica Independent Fairgrounds in Attica. Online bidding is also available for this quality and productive farmland. From your area leader in land auctions, Dye Real Estate and Land Company. For more information on this and other upcoming auctions, go to dyerealestate.com. Rodock Leasing Sales and Service is your place for Wilson livestock trailers. Wilson builds reliable, lightweight, and corrosion-resistant aluminum livestock trailers. Wilson is known for their attention to animal and operator safety, as well as the best in biosecurity. Wilson delivers your best value and your lowest cost of operation. Rodock is your home for Wilson livestock trailers. Call Rodock Leasing Sales and Service today. Learn more at rodock.com. Allen Davis Insurance Agency, your solutions provider in Wapakoneta, Lima, and Minster. Allen is a business owner and an active farmer. Trust Allen Davis Insurance Agency for auto, home, life, commercial, and total farm protection. For more information, check us out on the web at allendaisinsurance.com. Welcome back to In Ohio Country Today, and joining me now is Vivek Ramaswamy and Rob McColley. Vivek, of course, running for governor here in the Buckeye State, and Rob, his tag team partner, lieutenant governor. Rob currently serves as Senate president in Columbus. And gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Good to be back in Northwest Ohio.
You know, we're meeting today here at MVP Dairy. Vivek, let's talk first about how important it is to be in touch with an organization like this and listening to our farmers and what they have to say.
It's essential. I mean, you think about agriculture, this is our oldest industry. It's our most important industry, and it will remain our most important industry on my watch. And part of my job as a governor of the state, we'll talk about state policy. Mm-hmm. And by the way, part of the reason I chose this guy as lieutenant governor is he is probably most in touch with farming issues amongst those in the legislature, having grown up in Northwest Ohio yourself. So Rob's at my side on this. But for me, it's a top priority not just to set policy in the state, but also to be an advocate for Ohio and for Ohio farmers at the federal level. And I do think it's fair to say some of the federal policies may not be helping or working in the best interests of farmers, and I think we need to tweak those. And my job as a governor is to advocate for sensible trade policies that actually put the interests of farmers first, making sure that our export prices that we're commanding are going up while the input costs are coming down rather than the other way around. I think it's pretty important. That's on trade policies. Of course, there's other pressures, although I'd love to hear your perspective, Dan. But you think about fertilizer costs going up in the face of the Iran war. It's a big deal. I understand it's even affecting the composition of many farmers that I talk to, switching even to soybeans over corn. It's not an easy switch to make. Seed costs are higher. So there's a lot of factors going into this, not just the trade policies, which I also think we need to do some work on.
Right.
But even other factors, geopolitical factors that may not be going away anytime soon. And this is at a time when it's already tough business. You think about margin compression, it's real. Absolutely. And I'm a business guy by background myself, but I view the farmers across our state as fellow entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that our policies are working for our farmers rather than the other way around. Our farmers working for the betterment of our state, that's for sure. But are we doing enough to stand for them? I want to make sure we're doing the best we can so our family farms are thriving.
And there's so many variables in that, when it comes to land and pricing and input costs. One of the things that we've been talking about a lot on our TV show is land and land value and how that land is being used. And I know, Rob, you know firsthand, coming from Napoleon, Henry County, what used to be the Great Black Swamp, that's great farmland up there. And you know firsthand, too, that confluence of the Auglaize and the Maumee River and the importance of maintaining a healthy environment, too, with the H2 Ohio program. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, about land values, the use of land, and what our farmers are doing to protect the environment as well.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, because when we look across Northwest Ohio and really the entire state, farmers have embraced their role in the water quality discussion. Mm-hmm. And farmers at their heart are conservationists. They don't want nutrients running out of their fields. They want to be able to have great fields for the year after this and the year after that and the year after that. And ideally, they want a valuable, nutrient-rich farm to be able to hand over to the next generation. And so they've embraced the testing, the variable rate application that we've been able to try and incentivize through the H2 Ohio program. Mm-hmm. Many of them have embraced some of the edge of field practices that have been incentivized through the H2 Ohio program. And they've been some of our best advocates, really, for improving water quality. And in many cases, they get unfairly characterized as a bigger piece of the problem than what they actually are. And actually, I'm sure you've had Chris Winslow on your programming or you've talked with him in the past, the foremost expert on water quality in the state of Ohio, with Ohio State and Stone Lab in Lake Erie. He'll even tell you the primary driver of it is the legacy phosphorus. It's the phosphorus that's been in the ditch banks, the riverbeds, the fields for generations and generations. And so our existing farmers that we have today are some of the best stewards we have. Absolutely. They are a part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And they're just trying to make a go at it like the generation before them and the generation before them.
Vivek, is that something that you plan on keeping, the H2 Ohio program? Let's talk about how important that is and possibly even expanding that.
I'm very committed to it. I think it's working, and I think if something's working, you don't want to negate the thing that's actually helping you. You actually want to maybe double down on the parts of the program that are working out. I like the fact that it's a carrot-based program, right? This isn't coercing anyone to do anything, but it is a proper incentive structure that we're putting in place. It's also a good example for, as Rob mentioned, for us to educate the state that this was our farmers stepping up. Absolutely. To say that we care about water quality, right? Yeah. And one of the things I worry about is sometimes in life they say no good deed goes unpunished. And I think that just because the farmers stepped up doesn't mean that other groups shouldn't also step up to do their part. Absolutely. For runoff that also contributes to those algal blooms in Lake Erie. And I think that we have work to do to make sure that farmers aren't the only group shouldering the burden on their own. So we've had some pretty good conversations with farmers across the state about places where we could make tweaks, improve upon the program. I'm fully supportive and behind it.
That's exciting. Yeah, that's good
news. I do think that, look, anything you talk about also land ownership of these family farms. Mm-hmm. One of the things we want to do is we want to make sure the property tax burden is really right-sized for these families.
We were talking about property. That's one of the things that we need to discuss.
Yeah, a major rollback of property taxes that I want our farmers participating in while keeping CAUV intact. We want to make sure that our farmers are thriving. And I believe pretty soon after we take office, we're going to see some improved conditions for farmers, both through what we do in the state, while also me serving as a vocal advocate to the current administration, where I have a great relationship. We're going to be making sure that the federal policies that Ohio stands for, but also the state policies we implement, are helping our farmers rather than undercutting them.
So staying on the topic of land use, Rob, of course, you sit in an area that has a tremendous amount of wind power. Paulding County, Putnam County, that part of the state, were one of the first areas to introduce wind energy to our state. There's been a lot of discussion as far as solar energy and solar fields taking up valuable farmland. Also data centers. I mean, that's been a huge issue. So what are we wanting to do when you become governor and you get in that position with the rules and regulations when it comes to land use?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to kick it off. And Rob, you and I have talked about this pretty extensively as well.
Cool.
So the first thing I would say is we want to make sure the economic development in our state is happening on the terms of our local communities. That includes our farmers.
That's cool.
And that can be economic development that's actually very good for farmers. I mean, one of the kinds of economic development that the state hasn't perhaps focused enough on is thinking about the tools we have to bring economic development to our state. Let's talk about bringing some dairy processors into the state as well, right? That's job creation. It's economic value creation. It actually increases demand for our farmers' products. We're at a dairy farm right now. We're at MVP Dairy Farms where we're having this conversation. Well, more places that are able to process the output into yogurt, cheese, et cetera. That's good for economic development. It's good for revenue growth. It's also good for farmers. And so it's not that all economic development is bad for farmland or the other way around. I want economic development that's positive and lifts up our ag industry and ag sector as well.
The important thing I've always said with the tax revenues, you can't let the tail wag the dog. You got to let the other two things work themselves out too. And it's important to make sure that the local input is taken seriously. So you talk about solar farms. Prior to Senate Bill 52, a bill that I crafted, basically it was all a state top-down process where these solar farms went. There was really no meaningful local input. And we put that in place in large part because we were listening to our local communities and our farmers up here, wanting to make sure that if this decision was going to get made for these types of developments, it was being made at the local level.
Yeah. And I would say a couple of other things is property owners, they have the right to, it's their land, not the government's, not anybody else's. On the other hand, there's also a different factor here, which is that take wind, maybe take solar. They wouldn't be able to afford to pay what they're claiming to pay if it weren't for government subsidies. They're not government subsidies, they're taxpayer subsidies.
That's a good point.
So the irony is a lot of these farmers, the residents as well, are paying taxes where that money, which is really our money, right? It's the tax belongs to the taxpayer. Sometimes we forget that. But that money, when it's sitting in the government, is then used to artificially inflate certain sectors of the economy over others. That's not fair. It doesn't make any sense. So I think it's less about restricting a property owner's right to be able to transact on his land, which I think is a native pre-governmental right. Okay, your property is yours. Stuff of John Locke. It's the stuff this country was founded on. Okay, that's basic fundamentals of the country. We don't need to restrict that, but what we might say is our money that we entrust the government with should not be used selectively in this corporate favoritism, corporate welfare game for certain green tech sectors that actually aren't that green at all. Take wind. I mean, what happens to those turbines? They don't produce that much energy, in my opinion. You know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but not in the eye of this beholder when it comes to wind. That's just a personal opinion. But that's not why I say this. It's inefficient in energy generation. What happens to the turbines? What happens to the turbines? Nobody has answered that question. That's a long run pollutant in the name of actually creating clean energy. It's not clean. Solar farms, some of this stuff, we've got to be careful of the language. I don't call wind energy clean energy because there's no way to deal with the disposal any more than I call a solar farm has nothing to do with the farm. Okay? It's you call it solar energy, don't call it a solar farm. And if it weren't for the subsidies, then you wouldn't have the unfair imbalance of paying. It's not the free market when you have the government with a gun to your head asking for your tax dollars and then saying that we're going to give it selectively to one sector. I'm sorry, that's not the free market working. So we got to level with, I'm speaking very candidly here.
Yeah, that's
but
cool.
I think that's actually the issue, not restricting the rights of property owners. That's the wrong place to go. The right place to go is saying, what the heck are we doing with all these subsidies to wind and solar that you and I are paying for? That probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but we still need energy to run data centers. We still need energy to run our businesses here in the Buckeye State. So let's talk about the energy.
And wind and solar aren't very good at providing it. That's the problem right now, right?
I agree.
It's not. So coal, that's the main source of baseload power generation.
That's what I wanted to
ask.
Gas.
Eventually nuclear energy, which I actually do favor. These are the areas that are actually going to produce energy rather than the cosmetic, wind and solar subsidies.
Yeah, and that was my next question is when it comes to providing energy, Ohio certainly is a great resource with natural gas and with coal. Everybody wants to make sure it's clean burning and make sure it's environmentally safe, just like everything else. but those resources right under our feet should be utilized. And I hope you feel the same way, because our farmers, our farming community, it's all about energy.
This is a core theme that we launched this campaign with, right? So this is not a check the box issue for me. This is a foundational issue.
Cool.
I mean, Ohio's energy dominance is America's dominance in the world. I mean, there's no economic development, there's no success without energy. The good news is God has blessed our state with pretty much every natural gift we could wish for.
Absolutely.
We've got natural gas underneath our ground. The eastern part of our state is like, it's like a regional leader in terms of having natural resources available to us. We got to build those pipelines more quickly. We got to be able to build power plants, but do it on the terms of local communities along the way. That's a win-win-win that brings us all up, and that's the way I think about leading.
Yeah, I know. As many years as I've been in this industry, to see what natural gas has done to the economy of Appalachia, Ohio alone has been a positive for the Buckeye State. Those landowners having that resource tapped and being able to benefit from that has been a tremendous economic boom that goes unchecked or unnoticed in most cases here in the Buckeye State. Appalachia, Ohio is not a great place to do corn and soybeans, but they do a little bit of cattle over there and stuff like that. But it's been a hard hit part of the state when it comes to economics. And that particular resource I've seen it change lives in that part of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to step on the gas, literally and metaphorically.
Well, let's talk about the diversity here in the Buckeye State too. One of the things that I've noticed for the many years that I've been in broadcasting too is the changing landscape, excuse the pun, or pun intended, I guess, as far as agricultural diversity is concerned here in the Buckeye State. I've watched us go from one or two, vineyards here in the Buckeye State to being a mass producer of grapes and estate wineries here in the Buckeye State. The utilization of switching over to other crops like hops or even aquaculture for that matter. We've seen a lot of changes when it comes to the ag economy here in the Buckeye State. So let's talk about that and supporting those farmers and those diverse ag opportunities here in Ohio.
Well, and I think you can think about it in two ways, and we touched on one of them earlier: diversity and opportunities to sell into a premium market. The diversity and being able to use your land to its highest possible profit potential. Part of that involves attracting other end uses, like Vivek talked about, including trying to, from an economic development standpoint, bring in biofuel processors, ethanol processors, try to create more opportunities to sell into premium markets, but also embracing the fact that, especially when you get up along Lake Erie, like you were referencing, the soil type and the climate up there actually is not all that dissimilar from other parts of the country where you see some of these premium grapes grown that some people might have thought years ago it would be impossible to grow these types of grapes in parts other than maybe California, but you can grow very similar strands here in the state of Ohio. So whatever we can do to facilitate an opportunity for our farmers to sell into premium markets, to grow premium products, to use their land to its highest utilization, that's important, and that's going to be part of our ag strategy going forward, I'm sure.
One of our sponsors happens to be Central State University, and Central State University is just doing a great job of coming back into the inner cities, coming back into the cities. I can remember growing up in Cleveland in the 60s where we still had victory farms, where as one of 11 kids, mom would go to the farm near the YMCA and harvest fresh produce. And we're finally getting back to that. We're finally getting back to growing it here and eating it here and consuming it here and profiting from that production here in the Buckeye State. So let's talk about the importance of not only that, but also the colleges and universities, the Ohio State University Extension, and what Central State is doing to help uplift our urban communities.
Yeah, I think those are great opportunities. I mean, when you think about higher education, we have some issues in the state, no doubt. An enrollment cliff is one of them. So we have fewer and fewer students going into our colleges. We have a lot of colleges that offer duplicate programs. What I think we ought to do is establish a lot of these centers of excellence. And those are great examples of what those centers of excellence look like. Take the ag program at Ohio State. Look at what's going on at Central, like you mentioned. These are opportunities to build on where are we excelling and where do we have shortages and where do we have needs. I do think that we need to make sure more of our young people see agriculture as a viable career option.
Yeah.
That starts with education, not just in higher education, but even in high school, introducing them to opportunities. The Farm Science Review, right?
Yeah.
Didn't we run into each other there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, those are great opportunities in the fairs, even think about farmers markets. These are good opportunities in a family setting at a young age to engage kids. We take our kids to the farms all the time, right? That's part of where they enjoy interacting with animals. The fall season in particular is when we spend a lot of time out there. These are great opportunities at a young age to introduce kids to a path that interests them. And then we have to have a couple of universities at least that have real solid programs that train our young people to be useful as employees on a lot of these farms when it's hard to find labor. And there are a lot of solutions we got to talk about there. We got to, even federal issues relating to being able to get temporary labor as needed. These are important issues we got to talk about.
That's huge.
But let's start with cultivating the next generation of talent right here in the Buckeye State.
Yeah,
I think we can do it.
Yeah, we've seen some really cool things happening with a new FFA program in Lima City schools, inner city programs like that, up 4-H and what Central State does with 4-H and youth. Right here, we're at the Learning Center at MVP Dairy, and the Learning Center is literally that, where they bring in busloads of kids from all over the state to at least get a first-hand look at how dairy is produced.
Yes.
And how safe and clean and important it is to our industry. And the education aspect of our youth and getting them engaged in agriculture, I think, is extremely important. And I like the idea of being able to find more ways to consolidate that. I think one of the things that I've always been impressed about you is your ability to be able to take a business and then under that business find certain other ways of not only segregating, but also being able to perform and succeed. And I think if you look at the state like that, and I'm anticipating that's the way you're looking at it, to take this and then say, okay, the subsidiary of this company, which is the Buckeye State, state of Ohio, is one of those subsidiaries is agriculture.
Sure.
And we need to be more business-like and give them all the tools they need to continue what they're doing and to be even more successful than what they are right now.
Absolutely. And then to use that business analogy, if you got a different part of that subsidiary, right, or a different subsidiary altogether underneath the parent, you want to harvest synergies where possible. So I'll give you one example.
Yeah, energy.
Different area of education. Energy. That's a great example.
Exactly.
On education, think about veterinary medicine. So ordinarily you'd think about that outside of farming. Well, I want to think about how we use, say, OSU's veterinary medicine program, where they're training the next generation of young veterinarians to be effective in a way that helps our livestock farmers, right? So these aren't separate silos. It's holistic. So I like the idea of focused centers of excellence, both in our education system, the way we run our government, but also to look at the whole and to see how can these different parts of our state or our state strategy benefit one another. And that's where I'm coming from. And when I say we want to lead this state with a one Ohio mentality, I don't like this dividing us up between, black versus white, urban versus rural, even Democrat versus Republican in some ways. It's not really, you just can divvy up the pie. Let's think about how we grow the size of the pie and lift all of us up. And to me, that's really important, where a lot of people who have been in charge haven't really thought about the impact on ag, on impact on farmers of our economic development strategy. But if you're leading with a one Ohio mentality, we got to make sure we're developing the state and growing the state in a way that lifts up our farmers rather than leaving them behind.
And Rob, I'll turn to you when it comes to that subsidiary, if you will, of the governor's office is the House and Senate, the representatives of the state, the Senate members, making sure that they're operating, in a way that, brings us into that Ohio as a whole, Ohio as one. And the communication that's necessary from somebody like you, since you've walked those steps on both sides of the aisle with various other members, and to bring them in and educate them. Because we've had issues before with, members of the House, state representatives and Senate people that really don't have a clue about what's happening on the farm.
Yeah, and I think we've got a number of great farms across the state, including the one we're at right now, that is very good at outreach, very good at bringing people, including people from the inner cities who maybe have been hearing an awful lot of that negativity about our agricultural sector, opening the doors and saying, we have nothing to hide. We'd love for you to come out here and see how we run our business. Cooper Farms has done that here at MVP. They've done it, many others around the area. But I also think it is important, and Vivek has talked about this a number of times, a vision without execution is a hallucination. And we acknowledge, and he acknowledges in particular, in order for us to make the permanent, positive, impactful change on behalf of Ohio, the legislature and the governor's office need to work hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And we need to translate our policy wins into permanent legislation that can then benefit Ohioans for generations to come. And I look forward to working to help out in that role and in the next capacity that I'm going to be in.
It's part of why I chose Rob. He's the president of the Ohio Senate, and I need somebody. I'm a businessman. I'm coming from the outside. I'm not a politician in the state, right?
Which is a good thing, I guess. No offense, Rob.
Right. But it's a team effort, right? So you have a guy who's also really led the legislature and led the state Senate. It's going to be a great team, I think, working together. And that's a little different approach. And I'm not going to be bashing our opponents here, but I do think that this is probably the biggest contrast between two candidates we have ever seen in the history of governor's races in Ohio. I think in me, you have someone who celebrates success, celebrates economic success of our farmers and of every other part of our state, and also respects the bedrock principles on which our state and our country was built: faith, family, patriotism, and hard work. That's better than victimhood, wokeness, transgenderism, and climate ideology. And Thomas Jefferson, a great agrarian, as you know, he's the man who signed the Declaration of Independence 250 years ago. This year, 2026, is the 250th anniversary of him signing that Declaration of Independence. A lot of people forget this. He also was the guy who signed Ohio into the Union. He admitted Ohio as a state. Ohio was the only state that he admitted in 1803. And he famously said, the government you elect is the government that you deserve. And this is a year where this election will be won or lost based on turnout, not from our cities, but from our rural communities. And so, unlike others and unlike my opponent, I've visited all 88 counties, most of them many, many times over, and we're going to keep doing it. In the end, the government we elect is the government we deserve. And that's why Rob and I are in this. It's not for fame or fortune. I promise you that.
The reason that I ended up supporting Vivek very early on is I realized a few things. From working with the legislature, I realized, look, if we have a bold, visionary, forward-looking leader, somebody who is willing to not just look out in the next 4 or 8 years, but somebody who's willing to look out for the next 3 or 4 generations, what is the Ohio that we're going to leave to our children? We realize that if we have somebody who's willing to be the face and the spearhead of all of that and work with the legislature, there's no limit to what we can do. We have the natural resources we need to be an industrial giant, an economic powerhouse, an energy dominant state. And the last time we were all of those things, we leaned into that energy that we had in the eastern side of the state. We have everything we need to do to get back to there again. We need a leader at the top of the ticket, and we have one in Vivek Ramaswamy who has the vision to take us there, has the execution ability to take us there. And I joined his ticket, and I endorsed him even early on because I realized for him, it's not about the next 4 or 8 years. It's about his children, my children, our children, collectively across the state of Ohio, and all of our grandchildren as well. Creating the best Ohio we can to be able to build upon for generations to come. That's the important thing.
And Vivek, before we let you go, I'm just impressed with the fact that you're listening to Ohioans. You're getting in, like you said, visiting all 88 counties, getting those boots on the ground, and listening to Ohioans.
Absolutely.
You know,
I mean, Mercer County, Dark County, look at the place we're visiting today and have been coming back. I learned so much on these trips, okay? And I learned so much every time we're covering, putting a lot of miles on traveling this state up and down. I'll tell you this. I'm now more confident after having traveled the state, after having studied even in greater depth a lot of the policies we're going to be able to implement. I am confident we can lead Ohio to be the top state in the country, to raise a young family, to give our kids a great education,
absolutely,
to revive the American dream. That's the Ohio I want to wake up to in November, and for our farmers in particular. I know we're going to be able to make sure that we're bringing those input costs down in a thoughtful way increasing demand for your products, bring more processors, dairy processors, other ways of increasing demand, bringing down your costs, making sure your kids are getting a great education, making sure we have enough workers for you, both through the right federal policies we'll advocate for, but also through education of our young people, orient our actual policies from veterinary medicine training to incentives for young people to stay here. These are smart things we can do. Continue behind H2 Ohio, but in a way that doesn't put the burden just on farmers. I know we can do all these things, but in order to deliver for you, for the farmers of this state, Rob and I, we have to win this election. And I promise you, thanks be to God, that my family and I, we will be fine no matter who wins this election. This state and the farmers of this state will not. And so in order for us to be able to turn this into reality, we need you guys to show up in droves, and not just the people who are watching this, but really spread the message across the farmers of this state. We need you. Without you, we will not win this election. And with you, we will be in a position to deliver the biggest economic boom for our ag sector that we have seen in the modern history of our state. So you hold my feet to that fire. All I need you to do is spread the word across the farmers up and down that we have got your back. Tell them to get out and vote, and we'll do our part.
Vivek Ramaswamy and Rob McColley have been our guests here at In Ohio Country today. For more information, check us out on the web at inohiocountry.com. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you guys both joining us today, and look forward to seeing you down the road. And we'll be back with more In Ohio Country today, right after this.
Your outdoor fun starts here at Dad's Toy Shop. See us today for all of your favorite remote control land, air, and watercraft, and so much more. Dad's Toy Shop in downtown Wapakoneta is your one-stop shop for all of your hobby needs. From generation to generation, farmers do their best to protect their land, livestock, and farm operations, but they can't do it alone. Celina Insurance Group has partnered with local ag professionals to do just that, offering the peace of mind needed to run a successful operation. Celina's products and coverages come from our first-hand experience and relationships with local agents. For total farm protection, come experience the Celina difference. Learn more at celinainsurance.com. The SureTrack heavy-duty, low-profile dump trailer is engineered for professionals who demand the highest level of strength, versatility, and efficiency. And Rodock Leasing Sales and Service is your place for your next SureTrack dump trailer. Available in multiple configurations, tailored to fit your specific needs, and built for heavy-duty tasks. This trailer delivers top-tier performance, helping you get the job done right every time. Call Rodock Leasing Sales and Service today, your source for SureTrack dump trailers. Learn more at rodock.com. From landscaping to restoring fields to waterways and repairing damaged ground, Brilliant Seeders are built to handle it all. Designed for efficiency and consistent results, Brilliant is your one-and-done solution for seeding. And when it comes to finding the right equipment, Apple Farm Service is your one-stop shop. Don't settle for the way you've always done it. Upgrade your fields with Brilliant. Stop by your local Apple Farm Service or visit applefarmservice.com/brilliant to learn more. Hey, that's going to do it for this week's edition of In Ohio Country Today podcast, part of the In Ohio Country Today TV show in our iHeartMedia Radio Ag Network. Our feature story this week with Vivek Ramaswamy and Rob McColley. I want to thank Allison Ryan from MVP Dairy, and a big shout out to Connie Luck, who works in the Ramaswamy campaign. If you want more information about this story and so much more, check us out on the web at inohiocountry.com. You'll also get live market features on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. You'll also get news and information, where to see our TV show, our radio show, and our podcast at inohiocountry.com. Have a good day, everybody.